My name is Glenn. I am 54 years old, and I never imagined I would be standing in front of 300 wedding guests hearing my son's bride tell me to get out. The words still echo in my ears. Get out of here. You are not welcome. I looked at my son Marcus, the boy I raised alone after his mother died, hoping he would say something, anything. But he just stood there silent. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I smiled calmly and said, "Okay, I will leave, but I will not be leaving alone." Let me tell you what happened next, because when that bride realized who walked out with me, her perfect wedding fell apart. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. Have you ever been disrespected at a family event? Hit that like button if you want to see how I handled this situation. And please subscribe, because what unfolded after I walked out of that wedding will absolutely surprise you. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I met my wife Sarah in 1989 at a small diner in Denver, Colorado. She was 23, working as a nurse at the local hospital. I was 22, fresh out of technical school, making my way as an electrician. Sarah had this warmth about her, a kindness that drew people in. We married a year later in a simple ceremony with 40 guests. Our life together was modest, but filled with love. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Marcus came into our lives in 1995. I was 29, Sarah was 28, and we were over the moon. Holding that tiny baby in my arms, I promised him I would always be there. I had no idea how soon I would have to keep that promise alone. When Marcus was only 6 years old, Sarah was diagnosed with breast cancer. We fought it together for 2 years, but in 2003, when Marcus was just 8, Sarah passed away. Losing Sarah felt like losing half of myself, but I had Marcus, and he needed me. So I pulled myself together and became both mother and father to that boy. I worked double shifts as an electrician, sometimes taking weekend jobs to make ends meet. I learned to cook his favorite meals, helped with homework at the kitchen table, attended every parent-teacher conference, and cheered at every one of his baseball games. We became a team, Marcus and me, navigating life together. Those years were hard but beautiful in their own way. Every summer, we would pack up my old truck and drive to the Rocky Mountains for camping trips. We would sit by the fire roasting marshmallows, and I would tell him stories about his mother. On weekends, we worked on cars together in the garage. I taught him how to change oil, replace brake pads, fix an engine. Friday nights were sacred. We made homemade pizza from scratch, creating our own tradition. I raised Marcus with the values Sarah and I believed in. Respect others, especially women. Work hard for what you want. Stay humble no matter how successful you become. Money does not define your worth, character does. Marcus soaked it all in. He was a good kid, thoughtful and kind. When he got into college for engineering, I was so proud I cried. I took out loans to help with tuition, working extra hours to make sure he could focus on his studies. He graduated with honors in 2017 and landed a job at a prestigious architecture firm in Denver. My boy had made it. Then in 2023, Marcus met Brittany at a company event. She was 26, the only daughter of Harold Whitmore, who owned a chain of luxury hotels across the western states. Her mother, Patricia, came from old money in Boston, the kind of family that traces lineage back centuries. Brittany was beautiful, fashionable, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never wanted for anything. Marcus fell hard and fast. After 8 months of dating, he proposed. I first met Brittany at their engagement dinner held at an upscale restaurant downtown. The moment she walked into my modest home beforehand to pick up Marcus, I saw her eyes scan the living room, taking in the worn couch, the dated wallpaper, the family photos in discount store frames. Her smile was polite, but her eyes said everything. This was not her world. During dinner, she asked questions that felt more like evaluations. What do you do for work? Still an electrician. Oh, how quaint. You raised Marcus all by yourself. That must have been difficult financially. Every question had a subtle edge, a reminder that I existed in a different social class. I pushed down my discomfort, telling myself she was just nervous about meeting me. Over the following months, as wedding preparations began, I noticed changes in Marcus. He started wearing expensive designer clothes, talking about investments in real estate. When I offered to contribute to the wedding costs, Brittany actually laughed. "Do not worry about it," she said with a dismissive wave. "My family has it covered. You would not be able to afford what we have planned anyway." The words stung, but I said nothing. Marcus seemed distant during this time, caught between his old life and his new one. I tried talking to him one evening over coffee. "Son, are you happy?" I asked. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Dad, I love Brittany. She just needs time to get comfortable with you." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that after the wedding, everything would settle and I would be welcomed into their lives. So I accepted my invitation to the wedding, bought a new suit with money I had saved for months, and prepared to celebrate my son's happiness. What I did not know was that the wedding would become the most painful day of my life since Sarah's funeral. 2 months before the wedding, I called Marcus to ask about my role in the ceremony. There was a long pause on the phone before he finally said, "Dad, Brittany, and her mom are handling all the planning. Just show up and enjoy yourself." That answer should have been a warning, but I brushed it aside. Surely they would involve me somehow. After all, I was the groom's father, the only parent Marcus had left. But as weeks passed, I heard nothing. No calls about guest lists, no questions about my preferences for music or food. I was not invited to any planning meetings. When I asked Marcus about inviting my friends, people who had known him since childhood, he hesitated. "Dad, space is limited. We can only give you 15 seats. 15 seats. Meanwhile, I later learned the Whitmore family had invited over 200 guests. The rehearsal dinner took place at the Whitmore estate, a sprawling mansion in the foothills outside Denver. I drove up the long driveway feeling out of place in my older sedan, surrounded by luxury vehicles. Inside the house was like something from a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than I made in a year. I wore my best suit, the same one I bought for the wedding, but I still felt like an imposter. The Whitmore family and their friends filled the grand dining room dressed in designer outfits, discussing their recent trips to Europe and their vacation homes in Aspen. I sat at the far end of the table, mostly ignored. A few people asked what I did for a living, and when I said electrician, they nodded politely before turning away. No one asked about how I raised Marcus, about our story, about what it took to give him the opportunities that led him here. When it came time for speeches, Harold Whitmore stood first. He talked for 10 minutes about the Whitmore family legacy, about how proud he was to welcome Marcus into their distinguished lineage. He mentioned Marcus's impressive career, but nothing about his background or his father. Patricia spoke next, gushing about Brittany's privileged upbringing and how she always knew her daughter would marry well. The bridesmaids and groomsmen gave their toasts, all focused on Brittany and her family. I waited for someone to call on me to give me a chance to say a few words about my son. But the toasts ended, and the master of ceremonies announced it was time for dinner. I sat there stunned. No one even acknowledged my presence. Marcus caught my eye from across the room and gave me an apologetic shrug, but he did not speak up. He did not insist I be included. That hurt more than being overlooked. After dinner, I approached Marcus in a quiet corner. "We need to talk," I said gently. He looked nervous. "What is it, Dad?" I asked him directly if he was truly happy, if this was the life he wanted. He got defensive. "Dad, you are being too sensitive. Brittany's family is just formal. They will warm up to you." But I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt he quickly pushed away. "This is my wedding, Dad," he said firmly. "Please do not make trouble." I nodded and backed off. The last thing I wanted was to ruin his day. "I'm here for you, son," I said quietly. "Always." He hugged me briefly before being pulled away by Brittany's family for photos. I stood alone in that grand mansion, feeling more invisible than ever. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early in my small hotel room across town. The Whitmore family had booked rooms for their relatives at a 5-star hotel near the venue, but I was not included in those arrangements. I got dressed carefully, making sure my tie was straight, my shoes polished. I looked at the photo of Sarah I kept in my wallet. "Honey, I do not know what to do," I whispered. "Our boy is getting married, but I feel like I'm losing him." I arrived at the Aspen Grove estate, the venue for the ceremony, 90 minutes early. The place was breathtaking. A historic mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and towering oak trees. White tents had been set up for the reception, and an army of workers rushed around making final preparations. I stood watching the organized chaos, thinking about my own wedding to Sarah in that small church with folding chairs and homemade decorations. We had been so happy with so little. A coordinator approached me asking who I was. "The groom's father," I replied. She checked her clipboard, looking confused. "Oh, you are not on my VIP list, but you can wait in the guest area." The guest area, not the family area, just the guest area. I thanked her and walked away, my chest tight with hurt. As guests began arriving, I took my assigned seat, row 3 on the right side. Not the front row reserved for parents and immediate family, Row 3. The front row on the groom's side was occupied by Brittany's relatives, who apparently were more important than the man who raised the groom alone for 21 years. I watched as Harold Whitmore greeted guests like a king holding court, while Patricia showed off her designer dress. No one greeted me, no one acknowledged me. I was just another guest at my own son's wedding. The ceremony began promptly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The string quartet played as guests settled into their seats. The 300 chairs were nearly all filled a sea of elegant hats and expensive suits. I sat in my third row seat, hands folded in my lap, trying to stay composed. When the music changed, the wedding party began their procession. Bridesmaids in lavender gowns walked down the aisle on the arms of groomsmen. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Marcus appeared at the end of the aisle, but he was not alone. Harold Whitmore stood beside him, arm linked with my son's arm. They walked together down the aisle while everyone stood and applauded. Harold was walking my son down the aisle. The honor that should have been mine had been given to Brittany's father. My throat tightened. I gripped the edge of my seat to steady myself. This was not an oversight. This was deliberate. Someone had decided that Harold deserved to present the groom more than the father who raised him. Marcus did not even glance in my direction as he passed my row. He was smiling, caught up in the moment, seemingly unaware or uncaring that he had just broken my heart. The ceremony proceeded with all the elegance money could buy. The officiant spoke about love and family, about two people joining their lives together. When he said, "Who gives this man to be married?" Harold responded, "Her mother and I do, with the blessing of both our families. Both our families." But he had not asked me. No one had asked me anything. I was erased from my own son's wedding ceremony. Brittany made her entrance in a gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. The ceremony was beautiful, I will give them that. Flowers everywhere, sunlight streaming through the trees, a harpist playing softly. Marcus and Brittany exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising love and devotion. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, everyone applauded. I clapped too, though my hands felt numb. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle together, Marcus finally looked at me. Our eyes met for just a second. I tried to smile to show him I was happy for him despite everything. But I'm not sure what he saw in my face. Then they were past me, surrounded by congratulations and camera flashes, and the moment was gone. The reception was held in the grand ballroom inside the estate. Round tables decorated with towering floral centerpieces filled the space. A stage had been set up for the band, and a massive dance floor gleamed under chandelier light. I found my assigned seat, table 18. I counted quickly, there were 20 tables. I was at the second-to-last table, pushed near the back exit, as far from the head table as physically possible while still being inside the room. My table mates were distant cousins of Brittany, whom I had never met. They were polite but uninterested in conversation. I sat quietly as waiters brought out the first course, a fancy salad with ingredients I could not pronounce. The main course was equally lavish, filet mignon and lobster tail. The wine flowed freely. At the head table, Marcus and Brittany laughed with Harold, Patricia, and the bridal party. Not once did Marcus look back to check on me. After dinner, the speeches began. Harold stood first, microphone in hand. He talked about his daughter, about family legacy, about how Marcus was the son he never had. He welcomed Marcus into the Whitmore family with all the pomp of a royal decree. Then, Patricia spoke, her voice dripping with pride as she described Brittany's perfect life and perfect match. The best man made jokes about college days. The maid of honor cried happy tears. I waited. Surely someone would invite the groom's father to speak. Surely someone remembered I existed. But speech after speech passed and no one called my name. The master of ceremonies announced, "And now the bride and groom will share their first dance." That was it. The speeches were over and I had been completely excluded. Something broke inside me. I had stayed silent through everything, being placed in row 3, watching Harold walk Marcus down the aisle, sitting at table 18, but being denied even a few words about my son that was too much. I stood up from my table, my legs shaky but determined. I picked up my glass and began walking toward the front of the room. Conversations quieted as people noticed me moving through the crowd. Marcus saw me coming and his eyes went wide. "No, Dad," he mouthed, shaking his head slightly, but I kept walking until I reached the microphone stand. I gently took the microphone from its holder. The room fell completely silent. 300 pairs of eyes turned to me. "I'm sorry if I'm not on the program," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But as the father of the groom, I would like to say a few words." I saw Brittany's face harden immediately. Harold and Patricia exchanged annoyed glances, but I continued. Marcus, my son, you have been my whole world since the day you were born. After your mother passed away, we only had each other. I worked every day to give you a good life, to teach you the values your mother and I believed in. I raised you to be respectful, hardworking, and kind. Watching you grow into the man you are today has been my greatest joy. That is when Brittany stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Excuse me, she said, her voice cutting through my words. I think you have said enough. This is not the time for your speech. The room went dead silent. People looked shocked. I stopped mid-sentence, staring at her. Brittany walked toward me, her wedding dress rustling with each aggressive step. When she reached me, she spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. You are embarrassing everyone here, she hissed. This is my wedding, not yours. You are not supposed to speak. I tried to respond calmly. I only wanted to say a few words about my son, but Brittany was not interested in my explanation. Your son, she said sharply. He is my husband now, and you are making a scene. I looked past her to Marcus, hoping he would defend me, tell his bride to stop, but Marcus just stood there, frozen, his face pale. Brittany turned to Marcus. Tell him to leave, she demanded. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Brittany's eyes flashed with anger. Fine, she snapped. I will do it myself. She turned back to me, and what she said next, she said loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. Get out of here. You are not welcome. This wedding does not need you. The words hit me like a physical blow. 300 people heard my son's bride tell me to leave. The humiliation was complete. I stood there holding the microphone, feeling like the ground had opened beneath me. For a moment I could not move, could not think. All I could do was look at Marcus, silently begging him to say something, to stand up for me. My son's mouth moved wordlessly. He looked between me and Brittany, torn and terrified. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Dad, please, just go. Those 3 words destroyed me. After everything I had done, every sacrifice I had made, my son was choosing his bride's cruelty over defending his father. The boy I had raised alone, the child I had loved with everything in me, was asking me to leave. I looked around the ballroom. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others whispered behind their hands. Harold and Patricia sat calmly at the head table, not intervening, apparently fine with their daughter's behavior. The Whitmore family and friends showed no sympathy. To them, I was just a problem to be removed, an embarrassment in their perfect celebration. But then I noticed something else. Scattered throughout the crowd were faces I recognized, people from Marcus's past, from our life before Brittany. I saw Robert Walsh, Marcus's boss at the architecture firm, sitting at table 12 with a disgusted expression. I spotted Linda Hoffman, the mother of Marcus's childhood best friend, shaking her head in disbelief. There were others too, colleagues of Marcus, old neighbors, people who knew our story. Something shifted in me. The pain and humiliation began to transform into clarity. I did not deserve this treatment. I had done nothing wrong except love my son and want to be part of his wedding, and I was not going to slink away in shame. I set the microphone down carefully and looked directly at Brittany. Her arms were crossed, her expression victorious. I smiled, a calm smile that seemed to confuse her. Okay, I said quietly. I will leave, but I will not be leaving alone. Brittany's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I turned to face the crowd, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. To anyone here who was invited by me, or who knows me, or who cares about respect and family, I'm leaving now. You are welcome to join me. For a moment, nothing happened. Brittany let out a short, harsh laugh. Nobody will go with you, she said confidently. They are here for us. I did not argue. I simply turned and began walking toward the exit. My footsteps echoed in the silent ballroom. Then, from table 12, a chair scraped. Robert Walsh stood up. He was 60 years old, a respected architect who had mentored Marcus for 6 years. I came here to celebrate Marcus, he said loudly, but I cannot stay after witnessing this disrespect. He stepped away from his table and walked toward me. The room stirred with shocked whispers. Before Brittany could react, another person stood. Linda Hoffman, a kind woman in her early 50s, rose from table 9. This is disgraceful, she declared. I have known Glenn and Marcus since Marcus was in elementary school. I will not support this treatment. She joined Robert, walking in my direction. Then it was like a dam breaking. One by one, people stood up. A gray-haired man I recognized as my former neighbor, 2 of Marcus's colleagues from the architecture firm, a couple who had lived on our street when Marcus was growing up, the high school baseball coach who had trained Marcus. Each person stood, some saying a few words, others simply walking silently toward the exit where I stood. Brittany's face went from confident to confused to horrified. Marcus stood motionless, watching as his guests abandoned his wedding. "Stop," Brittany said weakly. "Where are you going?" But no one answered her. They just kept coming. 12 people in total left their seats and gathered around me near the ballroom exit. Some put supportive hands on my shoulder. Others nodded in solidarity. The remaining guests sat in stunned silence. The band had stopped playing. Waiters stood frozen with trays in their hands. Harold and Patricia looked furious but said nothing. Marcus finally moved, taking a step toward me. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking, but I just shook my head. I had nothing left to say to him. Not there, not then. I led the group of 12 out of the ballroom. As we passed through the doorway, I heard Brittany behind us trying to salvage the situation, her voice high and strained. "Everyone, please let us continue celebrating." But her words sounded hollow even from outside the room. We walked through the elegant hallway, past the startled venue staff, and out into the late afternoon sunlight. In the parking lot, we gathered near my car. The group stood in a loose circle, still processing what had just happened. Robert Walsh spoke first. "Glenn, I'm so sorry you were treated that way. That was completely unacceptable." The others murmured agreement. Linda Hoffman had tears in her eyes. "I remember when Sarah died," she said softly. "I watched you raise Marcus by yourself. You deserve so much better than what happened in there." My voice was thick with emotion when I replied, "Thank you. All of you. You did not have to walk out." Robert shook his head firmly. "Yes, we did. What that woman did was cruel, and Marcus allowing it was worse." A younger man, one of Marcus's co-workers named Paul, added, "I have worked with Marcus for 3 years. He always talked about what a great dad you are." I cannot believe he just stood there. We stood talking for several minutes, sharing our shock and anger. Someone suggested we go somewhere else, somewhere we could actually enjoy ourselves without the toxic atmosphere of that wedding. A woman named Susan, who had been our neighbor when Marcus was in middle school, knew a good restaurant nearby. Within minutes, we had a plan. The 12 of us would go have dinner together, a celebration of real friendship and real values. As we prepared to leave, I glanced back at the estate. Through the tall windows, I could see the reception continuing, but something was off. The energy was different, the atmosphere strained. Even from outside, I could tell our departure had damaged the party. Good, I thought. Maybe Brittany needed to learn that treating people with cruelty has consequences. Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. After we left, the remaining guests sat in uncomfortable silence. Harold tried to rally everyone, signaling the band to resume playing. Patricia stood and loudly toasted the bride and groom, her voice overly cheerful in a way that fooled no one. But the damage was done. The perfect wedding had been marred, and everyone knew it. Guests began whispering to each other. Some pulled out their phones. Within minutes, several people had recorded videos of the confrontation. One guest, a woman named Jennifer, who knew the Whitmore family socially, posted a video to her social media with the caption, "When the groom's father gets kicked out for trying to give a toast." Another guest shared a photo of the empty seats left by those who walked out, writing, "12 people just left this wedding in protest." The post spread quickly. Comments poured in from people horrified by Brittany's behavior. "This is heartbreaking. That poor father. How could the groom just stand there? I would never treat my partner's parent like this." Within 2 hours, the incident was trending on local social media groups. A Denver lifestyle blogger picked up the story, posting about the wedding disaster at Aspen Grove Estate. News traveled fast in Denver's social circles. Back at the wedding, more guests began making excuses to leave. 3 business associates of Harold Whitmore quietly departed, not wanting to be associated with the negative publicity. 2 of Patricia's friends from her charity boards slipped out, embarrassed by the family's handling of the situation. Several of Brittany's friends, while loyal to her, felt uncomfortable with what they had witnessed and left early. Marcus stood on the dance floor, unable to process what was happening. His wedding was falling apart. His father had been humiliated. 12 people had walked out in protest. Guests were leaving early, and he had done nothing to stop any of it. Brittany clung to his arm, trying to pretend everything was fine, but her smile was brittle. "We do not need them anyway," she kept saying. "This is still our perfect day." But it was not perfect. It was damaged beyond repair. And Marcus, standing in the middle of that crumbling celebration, finally began to realize what he had lost. At the restaurant, our group of 12 sat around a large table, the mood surprisingly light. We had escaped the oppressive atmosphere of the wedding and found ourselves in a cozy Italian place with checkered tablecloths and friendly waiters. We ordered food and drinks, and for the first time all day I felt like I could breathe. Linda Hoffman raised her glass. To Glenn she said warmly, "A wonderful father who deserves respect." Everyone clinked glasses. We spent the evening sharing stories about Marcus growing up, about the good years before Brittany entered the picture. Robert told funny stories about Marcus's early days at the architecture firm. Susan remembered Marcus as a polite teenager who always helped carry her groceries. The high school coach recalled Marcus's dedication to baseball. Each story reminded me of the boy I raised, the kind, thoughtful young man Marcus used to be. What happened, I wondered aloud. When did he become someone who would let his wife treat me like that? Robert considered the question. Money changes people, he said sadly. Marrying into wealth can make you forget where you came from. Linda added, he is young. Maybe this is a phase. Maybe he will come back to his senses. I wanted to believe that, but sitting there surrounded by people who actually cared about me, I realized something important. Whether Marcus came back or not, I would be okay. I had my dignity, I had my self-respect, and I had people in my life who valued me. Brittany and her family could keep their money and their status. I had something more valuable. The evening stretched on, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. We ate good food, drank good wine, and enjoyed each other's company. It was the celebration Marcus's wedding should have been. When we finally said our goodbyes in the parking lot, everyone hugged me. Call me if you need anything, Robert said. Linda echoed the sentiment. You have friends, Glenn. Do not forget that. I drove home alone that night, but I did not feel lonely. I felt liberated. Walking out of that wedding was the right choice. Standing up for myself, refusing to accept mistreatment that was strength, not weakness. When I got home, I sat in my quiet living room and looked at the photo of Sarah on the mantel. I did the right thing, honey, I told her picture. I know I did. That night I slept better than I had in months. No more anxiety about the wedding, no more worrying about fitting in with the Whitmore family. It was over. Whatever happened next was up to Marcus. While I slept peacefully, Marcus was experiencing a very different night. The wedding reception had ended awkwardly, with nearly a third of the guests having left early. Brittany was furious, blaming me for ruining her perfect day. Marcus and Brittany returned to their honeymoon suite, but instead of romantic celebration, they spent the night arguing. Brittany wanted Marcus to cut off all contact with me immediately. Your father embarrassed us in front of everyone, she raged. He is toxic. He needs to be out of our lives. Marcus, exhausted and confused, tried to defend me weakly. He just wanted to give a toast. You did not have to kick him out. That only made Brittany angrier. Are you choosing him over me? On our wedding night, Marcus backed down as he always did with Brittany. No, of course not. I'm sorry. He thought that would end it, but then Brittany showed him her phone. The videos, the posts, the comments. Hundreds of people online were criticizing them, calling Brittany cruel and Marcus spineless. Marcus felt sick reading them. This was not how his wedding was supposed to be remembered. The next morning, things got worse. Marcus's phone rang before 7. It was Robert Walsh. Marcus, we need to talk. His boss said seriously. The video from your wedding is circulating widely. The firm has received several emails and comments on social media. Our clients are concerned about our image. Marcus felt panic rising. What are you saying? Robert sighed. I'm saying you need to take some time off, unpaid leave, until this blows over. Marcus hung up, stunned. His honeymoon, which was supposed to start that day with a flight to Hawaii, suddenly seemed impossible. How could he enjoy a tropical vacation knowing his reputation was destroyed, his relationship with his father shattered, and his job in jeopardy? Brittany, hearing the news, had a meltdown. This is all your father's fault, she screamed. If he had just stayed quiet, none of this would have happened. But deep down, Marcus knew that was not true. This was not my fault. This was the fault of how they had treated me. For the first time, Marcus began to see Brittany clearly. Her cruelty, her selfishness, her complete lack of respect for anyone she considered beneath her. And he saw himself clearly too. He had become someone who cared more about status and money than about family and values. He had betrayed his father, the man who sacrificed everything for him. What had he become? Over the following week, the situation continued to unravel. The wedding videos went semi-viral in Denver social circles. Local news outlets picked up the story without naming names, running pieces about wedding etiquette and family respect. Marcus received dozens of messages from old friends expressing disappointment. Some people defended him, saying he was caught in a difficult position, but most were critical. Your dad raised you alone and you let your wife kick him out. Shameful. Marcus tried to focus on his new marriage, but Brittany made it impossible. She refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. In her mind, I was the villain who ruined her perfect day. She wanted Marcus to publicly denounce me, to release a statement saying I had been inappropriate. Marcus refused. No matter how confused he felt, he could not bring himself to throw me under the bus publicly. Brittany began showing her true colors. Without the wedding to plan and the relationship to secure, she became demanding and cruel. She criticized everything about Marcus, from his clothes to his career to his background. You need to act like you belong in my world, she would say coldly. You are a Whitmore now. Act like it. Marcus started to see that Brittany had never loved him for who he was. She loved the idea of molding him into her perfect accessory. 2 weeks after the wedding, unable to sleep and filled with regret, Marcus finally looked at the videos online. He watched himself stand silent while Brittany humiliated me. He saw his father's face, the pain in my eyes, the way I held myself with dignity even in that awful moment. Then he watched the 12 people walk out, abandoning the wedding in protest. Marcus realized with crushing clarity that those 12 people had more courage and integrity than he did. That night, Marcus made a decision. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I heard the knock on my door. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened it, Marcus stood there looking terrible. His eyes were red and sunken, his clothes wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He looked like he had not slept in days. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. Marcus walked into my living room, the home where he grew up, and just stood there looking around. Everything was the same as it always was. The worn couch we used to watch movies on, the kitchen table where we did homework together, photos of him throughout his childhood covering the walls. His baseball trophies still on the shelf. This house held 29 years of memories of love and sacrifice, and he had thrown it all away for a woman who treated me like garbage. Marcus turned to face me and tears streamed down his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong." His voice cracked with emotion. "I let you down. I let Mom down. I let myself down." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. I needed to hear more than just apologies. I needed to understand. Through tears, Marcus poured everything out. He told me how he had been blinded by Brittany's wealth and beauty, how he convinced himself that her cold treatment of me was just shyness or class difference, how he ignored every warning sign because he was so desperate to be part of her world. He admitted that on our wedding day, when Brittany humiliated you, I knew it was wrong. I knew I should defend you. But I froze. I was so afraid of losing her, of losing that life, that I betrayed the most important person in my life. Marcus dropped to his knees, sobbing. "You raised me by yourself for 21 years. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. You taught me values and morals and how to be a good man. And I repaid you by standing there while my wife kicked you out of my wedding. I'm a terrible son. I do not deserve your forgiveness. I watched my son break down and my heart ached. I was still hurt, still angry, but he was my child. No matter how much he had wounded me, I still loved him. But love does not mean accepting unacceptable behavior. I need to understand something," I said quietly. "Do you actually see what you did wrong? Or are you just sorry because there were consequences?" Marcus looked up at me, his face wet with tears. "I see what I did wrong. I abandoned my principles. I chose status over substance. I let someone disrespect you because I was too weak to stand up to her. I became someone you would be ashamed of." He took a shaky breath. "After the wedding, I tried to make it work with Brittany. I tried to convince myself that once things calmed down, we would be happy. But Dad, she does not respect me. She never did. She wanted me because I could be molded, controlled, turned into the perfect Whitmore son-in-law. But that is not who I am." "What are you saying?" I asked. Marcus stood up, wiping his eyes. "I'm saying I filed for divorce yesterday. Brittany was furious, threatened to take everything, but we had a prenuptial agreement. I get to walk away with what I came with." He looked at me with red, earnest eyes. "I am choosing you, Dad. I am choosing the values you taught me. I am choosing the life we had before I got lost in all that wealth and status, if you will still have me." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Marcus's ragged breathing. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was genuinely broken, genuinely remorseful. This was not manipulation or performance. This was real. I thought about Sarah, about what she would want. She would want our family healed. She would want Marcus to learn from this and become better. I stepped forward and pulled Marcus into a hug. He collapsed against me, sobbing, like the little boy who used to cry in my arms after nightmares. I held him, my own tears falling now. "I forgive you," I said. "But son, this cannot ever happen again. You have to promise me that no matter who you marry, no matter what life you build, you will never forget where you came from and who stood by you." Marcus pulled back, looking me in the eyes. "I promise, Dad. I swear on Mom's memory. I will never let anyone disrespect you again. I will never choose money or status over family. I have learned my lesson. It was the most painful lesson of my life, but I have learned it." We stood there, father and son, beginning the long process of rebuilding what had been broken. Over the next 3 months, Marcus proved his sincerity. The divorce from Brittany went through relatively quickly since the marriage had lasted less than a month and the prenup was airtight. Brittany tried to spin the story, claiming Marcus was unstable and I was manipulative, but no one believed her. The wedding videos had shown everyone exactly who the villain was. Marcus returned to work after his suspension. Robert Walsh, who had walked out of the wedding with me, welcomed him back, but made it clear that Marcus needed to rebuild his reputation through actions, not words. Marcus threw himself into work, proving his worth through dedication and humility. His colleagues slowly began to respect him again. Most importantly, Marcus moved into a small apartment near my house. We began having dinner together every week, just like we used to. Sometimes we worked on his car together in my garage. On weekends, we went hiking in the mountains, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, gradually, we rebuilt our relationship. It was not the same as before. The wound from the wedding would always be there, a reminder of what happened when we lost our way. But in some ways, we were closer now. The crisis had forced us both to clarify what really mattered. One evening, about 4 months after the wedding, we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. Marcus turned to me. "Dad, I want you to know something. Walking out of that wedding standing up for yourself, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. When I saw those 12 people follow you out, I realized they had more courage than I did. You taught me that day what real strength looks like. It is not about money or status or fitting in. It is about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve." I looked at my son, seeing the man he was becoming, again the man Sarah and I raised him to be. "You are going to be okay," I told him. "We are going to be okay. Sitting here now telling you this story, I think about everything that happened. That day at the wedding when Brittany told me to get out, and I walked away taking 12 people with me, was one of the hardest moments of my life. Being humiliated in front of 300 people by my own son's bride, watching Marcus fail to defend me, it broke something inside me. But it also made something clear. I realized that my worth as a person, as a father, was not dependent on whether the Whitmore family accepted me. It was not dependent on sitting at the head table or giving a toast. My worth came from the life I built, the values I held, the way I raised my son with love and sacrifice for nearly 3 decades. Brittany and her family could not take that away from me, no matter how hard they tried. In the months after the wedding, I went through my own healing process. At first, I was angry, so angry I could barely sleep. Angry at Brittany for her cruelty, angry at Marcus for his weakness, angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. But eventually, the anger faded into something else. Acceptance. Peace, even. I accepted that I could not control Marcus's choices. I could only control my own response, and I chose to walk away with dignity rather than beg for acceptance from people who did not value me. Forgiveness came gradually. I forgave Brittany not because she deserved it, but because holding on to that resentment was poisoning me. She was a product of her upbringing, someone who measured worth by bank accounts and social standing. I could pity her even. Living in that shallow world where people are valued only for what they can provide must be exhausting. I forgave Harold and Patricia for raising a daughter who treated people as disposable. And most importantly, I forgave Marcus. He made a terrible mistake, but he owned it, learned from it, and changed because of it. That is all any of us can do. The real gift from that awful day was discovering who my true friends were. Those 12 people who walked out with me, they showed me that I was not alone. Robert Walsh. Linda Hoffman and the others, they are still in my life. We get together for dinner sometimes, and we always laugh about the time we staged a mass walkout from a wedding. It has become a funny story now, though it was not funny at the time. As for Marcus, he is doing well. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. He is back in good standing at work. He is dating someone new, a kind woman named Jennifer, who works as a social worker. She is down-to-earth, compassionate, and most importantly, she treats me with respect. When Marcus introduced us, the first thing Jennifer said was, "Mr. Glenn, Marcus talks about you all the time." It is an honor to meet the man who raised such a good person. That simple statement of respect meant the world to me. Marcus has changed. He dresses more modestly now, drives a regular car instead of the luxury vehicle Brittany insisted on, and spends his money on experiences and charity rather than status symbols. He volunteers at a youth center, mentoring kids who lost parents, giving back in a way that honors Sarah's memory. The boy I raised is back. The man Sarah would be proud of is here. I think about Sarah often, especially during moments like these. I wish she could have been at Marcus's wedding, the real wedding he deserves, with someone who values him for the right reasons. But I also think she was with me that day at the Aspen Grove estate. When I stood up to leave, when I refused to accept disrespect, I felt her strength flowing through me. Sarah always had a backbone of steel. She would have walked out too. Looking back now, I understand that sometimes the greatest inheritance we give our children is not money or status. It is values. It is teaching them the difference between right and wrong, between respect and exploitation, between love and manipulation. I gave Marcus those tools when he was growing up. He lost sight of them for a while, seduced by a world that promised happiness through wealth. But ultimately, those values I instilled in him brought him back. That is a father's real success, not raising a perfect child, but raising a child who can recognize when they are lost and find their way home. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between fitting in and standing up for yourself? Have you ever walked away from something that was destroying your self-respect, even though it was hard? Drop a comment below and share your story. I would love to hear it. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because these stories about real-life challenges and how we overcome them matter. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Life is too short to accept disrespect from anyone, no matter who they are or what they can offer. Remember that your worth is not determined by others' opinions or acceptance. Your worth comes from who you are, the values you hold, and the way you treat people. Never forget that. May you always have the courage to walk away from situations that diminish you. May you find the strength to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. And may you always remember that real family is not about who shares your blood or your last name. It is about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And never, ever let anyone make you feel like you do not matter, because you do. You absolutely do.